It is 6 p.m. here in Cairo, time for Egypt News, and we start straight away with the main headlines. Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli meets the American Democrat and the American Republican who are participating in the American House of Representatives group of Friends of Egypt. Deadly Turkish airstrikes shattered the hours-old U.S. broker deal, and the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson launches a charm offensive to sell the Brexit deal to the skeptical MPs. Welcome back. Continuing the visit to Washington, Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli met with the American Democrat Dutch Robertsberger and the American Republican Jeff Fortenberry, who are participating in the American House of Representatives group of Friends of Egypt. During the meeting, Madbouli praised the American representatives' efforts to support the issues of concern to Egypt in the American House. The Prime Minister stressed the Egyptian stance, denouncing the Turkish assaults in Syria, calling for the Turkish forces to withdraw from the Syrian territories. Madbouli also reiterated the Egyptian constant stance towards the file of the Renaissance Dam, stressing that water is a vital issue to the Egyptian people. Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli participated in a discussion session at the Middle East Institution in Washington with the attendance of the Egyptian ambassador, as well as several members of the institution, including writers, researchers, and the former members of Congress. Madbouli reviewed the latest developments in Egypt during President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi's tenure, asserting that the reform program came within the framework of hard economic situations. Madbouli also displayed a social protection program and the reform that the governments adopted to secure success in currency and financial fields. Concerning the Renaissance Dam, Madbouli assured that Egypt will not stand in the face of the development efforts in the Nile Basin countries, but also it will never accept any violation of the Egyptian right in the Nile water. Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli also held talks with the chairman of the American Althanya telecommunication company. The Prime Minister praised the undergoing joint cooperation with the Althanya company to build a telecommunication network in the new administrative capital. Madbouli also said he is looking forward for more direct investments by the company in different communications fields in light of the Egyptian free trade agreements with various zones worldwide. The Prime Minister also directed the Ministry of Communication to follow up on the cooperation files with the American company in the upcoming period. For his part, the Minister of Communications, who was attending the meeting, has presented a full review on the progress achieved by Egypt in the telecommunication and the information technology field through the past years. He also noted that such progress has allowed Egypt to be one of those countries which owns a developed infrastructure in this field and can receive international investments.
إعجابي الشديد بشخصية الرئيس المتفردة، خاصة فيما يتعلق بمكافحة الإرهاب. هذا الفكر الشيطاني الخبيث. ستجدني أنا ومصر بجانبك في تنفيذ هذه الاستراتيجية لمواجهة الإرهاب والقضاء عليه.
President, that you have a great friend and ally in the United States and in me.
Welcome back. Cairo hosts today the meetings of the Libyan members of parliament that is expected to tackle discussions among the Libyan lawmakers on ending the ongoing crisis in the country. The Libyan MPs are visiting Cairo at an invitation from the Egyptian House of Representatives to take part in the meetings that aim at unifying efforts to find the roadmap to help end the chaos gripping Libya. This is the second meeting hosted by Egypt. The first was held in July of this year. The Lebanese Prime Minister Saad al-Hariri has cancelled the cabinet meeting scheduled for Friday amid nationwide protests. The anti-government protests in a country mired by the economic crisis entered the second day today as hundreds of protesters blocked the major highways in Lebanon after thousands angry at the proposed tax increases thronged the streets overnight, demanding the government's resignation in the biggest demonstrations in years. French President Emmanuel Macron said that he and his German and British counterparts will meet the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan soon over Ankara's military offensive in Syria. The announcement comes as Erdogan warned that Ankara would restart the operation against the Kurdish forces in Syria on Tuesday evening if they do not withdraw from the safe zone. The details in the upcoming report.
White House spokeswoman Stephanie Grisham said on Friday implementing a ceasefire in northeastern Syria will take time, as machine gun fire, shelling and smoke were observed at the Syria-Turkey border 1 day after top U.S. officials announced a truce. Syrian rebels backed by Turkey continued to clash with Kurdish fighters Friday, and an airstrike killed 5 civilians in the village of Bab el-Khair, east of Ras al-Ain, according to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. Turkey agreed after talks with visiting U.S. Vice President Mike Pence in Ankara on Thursday to suspend its offensive in northern Syria, with Kurdish forces withdrawing from a safe zone along the border that Turkey wants to create. The 5-day suspension agreement was meant to provide a pause for the evacuation of Kurdish fighters from the battleground border town of Ras al-Ain and other areas Turkey wants to control along its border with Syria. The ceasefire comes just over a week after Ankara launched its cross-border operation against the Syrian Kurdish People's Protection Units, the YPG, which Ankara sees as a dangerous offshoot of Kurdish terrorists in Turkey, the Kurdistan Workers' Party, PKK. Before launching the operation, the Turkish government said it wanted to create a safe zone that would be 30 kilometers deep and run over 400 kilometers along northern Syria. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has previously said the zone would then allow 2 to 3 million Syrian refugees to return to their country. He has faced a growing popular backlash over the presence of 3.6 million Syrian refugees in the country, the highest number in the world. According to the observatory, the offensive left more than 500 people killed on both sides, including nearly 100 civilians, while around 300,000 have been displaced.
The United Nations said that nearly 1,700 people, most of them women and children, had fled the fighting in northeastern Syria and crossed into Iraq in recent days. The United Nations Refugee Agency spokesman said for the 4th consecutive day, the UNHCR has been receiving hundreds of refugees crossing the border into Iraq from northeast Syria. He first said that over 1,600 Syrian refugees have been transported from the border areas to Bardarash refugee camp, adding though that another 734 people have been registered crossing the border overnight. The Sudanese government delegation and the popular movement led by Abdelaziz Al-Hilw signed the roadmap deal to negotiate in South Sudan's capital, Juba. In parallel, the Joint Committee concerned with the peace negotiations between the new government and the Rebels Front concluded the first meeting in Juba. The meeting discussed the means to push peace process and the ways to proceed from the stage of the announcement of principles and the trust building signed last month to negotiate the essential issues. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson launched the charm offensive to sell the Brexit deal to the sceptical MPs, with the looming vote in Parliament resting on a knife edge. The Conservative leader pulled off a major coup in agreeing a new divorce deal with the European Union, paving the way for him to deliver the promise to leave the bloc on October the 31st. But the agreement must still be approved by the House of Commons, which is meeting for the first time on a Saturday in 37 years to debate the text, and many MPs are strongly opposed. Yet, Johnson must now ratify the deal in the British Parliament, where he has no majority, and the opponents are plotting maximum political damage ahead of the imminent election. And at least 62 people were killed and dozens wounded when a bomb exploded inside the mosque during the Friday prayers in eastern Afghanistan. Provincial police spokesman said that the blast took place in Hasakamina district in Nangarhar province and wounded at least 40 people, adding that the dead were all worshippers. No militant group has claimed responsibility so far. The Ministry of Planning and Administrative Reform and the Arab Organization for Administrative Development announced that both sides will intensify cooperation in implementing a number of programs in the field of administrative reform. The remarks were made ahead of a meeting of the Arab Organization Executive Council on the ministerial level due to take place in Morocco. The new partnership came in line with the country's keenness to carry out the administrative reform program. Saudi Aramco announced that it plans to push back the initial public offering, which had been expected to be launched next week. Aramco has envisioned the public listing with about 2% of the capital trading on At-Tadawul exchange in Saudi Arabia and an additional listing on a foreign exchange. The company intends for about 5% of the shares to be available on the public exchanges. The United States imposed tariffs on a record $7.5 billion worth of European Union goods, earning a swift threat of retaliation by the European Union. The tariffs came after talks between the European officials and the American trade representatives failed to win a reprieve. Airbus is among the high-profile targets, with Europe ready to hit back against the list of iconic American products by next year. The Chinese economy grew at the slowest rate in 27 years in the third quarter as the country grapples with the protracted trade war with the United States and slowing domestic demand. GDP figures showed that the Chinese economy expanded 6% in July to September, compared with 6.2% in the second quarter. The figure marks the worst quarterly figure since 1992, although still within Beijing's target range of 6 to 6.5% for the whole year. And the German finance minister said that the European Union officials were working to hammer out a trade agreement with the United States and avert the threatened tariffs, and he hoped the deal could be reached. On the sidelines of the IMF and the World Bank meetings in Washington, the German minister asked about new American tariffs on the European Union imports, told reporters that he favored a calm approach that did not further escalate the tensions with Washington. Participants of the meeting welcomed the news of the agreement on the British exit from the European Union and the American-Chinese trade deal as positive developments that could strengthen the world economy. The Egyptian Premier League fourth round matches resume with two matches. Al-Ittihad al-Secondary meets Wadi Degla and Al-Ismaili hosts Haras al-Hudud. On Thursday, Pyramids against Samuha ended in a goalless draw. Pyramids raised the tally to 8 points at the second spot, while Samuha raised the balance to 5 points in the 9th place of the standings. Earlier, Masr al-Maqasa achieved the victory over Al-Masr al-Bursaidi 1-0 at the Suwais Stadium, while Al-Intag al-Harbi beat MP 1-0. By this result, Masr al-Maqasa raised the tally to 6 points in the 6th position, while Al-Masri retained the 9th place with 4 points. And Al-Intag al-Harbi raised the balance to 6 points in the 8th place, while MP's tally froze at 1 point at the bottom of the league standings. Meanwhile, FC Masr match against Telgona ended in a goalless draw. By this result, FC Masr are in the 14th place with 3 points, while El Gona are in the 10th position of the standings with 4 points. Spain's La Liga has renewed the efforts to host a league game in Miami, officially requesting a change of venue for December's fixture between Villarreal and Atletico Madrid. The request made to Spain's Football Federation follows the league's unsuccessful attempt to host Girona's January meeting with Barcelona in the American city. At the time, the vocal objections were raised by FIFA, football's global governing body, whose president Gianni Infantino said he would never authorize the league match to be played outside of its territory. This brings us to the end of Egypt News for today. Thank you for watching and goodbye.